Hey everybody, welcome to another lesson of learning Japanese. Today we are going to cover how to compare two entities with each other. And to do that, we are going to use the construct X to Y to de wa どちらの方が A ですか? Here we see that the variable X and the variable Y are the two entities that we're comparing, and the variable A is the criteria that we're comparing these two entities to, as in which one is maybe better, which one is cooler, which one is longer, etc. So you may have noticed that the format that I just said right now is actually an interrogative sentence because of the particle ka at the end to indicate that it is a question. So basically what that translates into is between X and Y, which one is more A? So if we're going to answer this question now, we're going to use some of the same format, but to answer is going to be a bit different. It's going to be X to Y to de wa Xの方が YよりAです. So what we asked earlier was between X and Y, which one is more A? And what I just said right now in the answer is that between X and Y, X is more A than Y. So there, I'm answering that X is more A than Y, but there are some alternative answers to the same question. Another way to say this is also X to Y to de wa Y yori Xの方が Aです. And this is pretty much the same thing. If the earlier answer was saying that between X and Y, X is more A than Y, well, in this case, we're just saying between X and Y, more so than Y, X is A. You can see how the meaning is pretty much the same thing. There's just a little switching as to which X or Y you're mentioning in the sentence first. Furthermore, there's also a more implicit construction for this grammar construct. If the two compared entities are already obvious from the context and you don't have to mention them explicitly, then you can also say どちらの方が A ですか? And when you're answering the question, you can simply say Xの方が A です or Yの方が A です if X is more A or Y is more A respectively. So now we're going to get pretty deep into this grammar construct because when you're comparing two entities, they don't necessarily have to be just nouns. They can also be two clauses, as in instead of saying between a dog and a cat, which pet is more cute, you can also say between adopting a dog or adopting a cat, which one do you think is better? Well, in the first case, we were just comparing two nouns, but in the second one, we were comparing two clauses in which there were verbs being used and conjugated, and the verbs here are especially what we have to worry about because this grammar construct comes with guidelines when you're using clauses and you're comparing those. So when we're using clauses in this grammar construct, the clauses always have to be nominalized. And what this means is, well, it's basically the same as English. When you say, which is better, reading the book or watching the movie, you can see how reading and watching are nominalizations of the verbs read and watch. If we didn't nominalize it, the question would be, read book and watch movie, which one is better? That doesn't make sense at all. The person you're addressing might be able to make sense of what you're saying just because of the context, but grammatically that's completely wrong. And it's the same in Japanese. So when we're using clauses, we have to nominalize the verbs, which for the most part always come at the end of the clause. So what we're doing when we're nominalizing the clause is basically we're just nominalizing the verb. So in Japanese, when we want to nominalize a verb, we simply use the plain form of the verb. For example, to watch is miru and to read is yomu. If we want to nominalize those verbs, we're going to take those plain forms and we're simply going to add the character no after them. So miru no and yomu no are the normalizations of the verbs miru and yomu. We also have the choice of using koto instead of no and using that to nominalize the verbs, but there's a distinction between which one you want to use depending on the nuances of your sentences, and we're going to leave that for a future video because it gets pretty complicated. So in this video, we're simply going to stick to no when we're nominalizing verbs. So now let's jump into some examples and get a more interactive feel of this grammar construct. So for our first example sentence, we have the line 日本の漫画を読むのとアメリカのコミックスを読むのとではどちらの方が楽しいですか? So what is this sentence saying? It is saying between reading Japanese manga and reading American comics, which one is more fun? Let's break this sentence down bit by bit. First up, we have Nihon, which is Japan. We have the particle no, which is going to initiate the noun of a noun grammar construct that we've covered. After that, we have the word manga. So Nihon no manga is going to be Japanese manga. We have the direct object particle o because Nihon no manga is going to be acted upon. We have the verb right after that, yomu, After yomu, we have the particle no again, and this time it's being used for what I just mentioned earlier. We're nominalizing the verb yomu, so now we have Nihon no manga o yomu no, which is reading Japanese manga. We have the particle to, which here basically means and it's in line with the guidelines of this grammar construct. After that, we're now describing the next entity, which is America no komiksu, and that is going to be American comics. Again, we have the direct particle o to be the direct object marker. We have yomu no again because what do you do with comics? You read them. So yomu no to again. That's the same as the previous entity's descriptor. Right after that, we have dewa, which is in line again with the grammar construct. After that, we have dochira, which basically means which. After that, we have no, which here is denoting a possessiveness. Next, we have the word ho, which basically means way. So, which way? Right after that, we have the particle ga, and then we have tanoshi. And tanoshi means fun, and that is an adjective. It's an e adjective. Right after tanoshi, we end the sentence with des, and then we end the sentence furthermore with the sentence ending particle ka to denote an interrogative sentence. So altogether, we have Nihon no manga o yomu no to, America no komiksu o yomu no to de wa dochira no hou ga tanoshii desu ka? And that translates to, between reading Japanese manga and reading American comics, which one is more fun? So now we're going to answer this question. We're going to take the Japanese manga side, and we are going to say Nihon no manga o yomu hou ga America no komiksu o yomu yori tanoshii desu. So there are pretty significant things to point out here. So first up, you should notice that in the answer, we don't have the normalization of the clause anymore. We answered with the first part of the sentence saying Nihon no manga o yomu hou instead of Nihon no manga o yomu no hou. And the reason behind this is that because when we're using a normalized clause and it appears before the phrase no hou, the no particle is just dropped completely. And note that this happens for the entity that wins out in the end, but for the second part of the sentence, when we're saying America no komiksu o yomu no yori tanoshii desu, we see that you can still add the normalization to the verb yomu for reading American comics. And the reason behind that is because we aren't mentioning the phrase no hou here. So we can still include the normalization, but it is also important to note that this no is optional. So we could just as well have said America no komiksu o yomu yori tanoshii desu. So again, altogether the answer is Nihon no manga o yomu hou ga America no komiksu o yomu no yori tanoshii desu. And the no particle right after America no komiksu o yomu is optional here. Okay, so we've cleared level 1. We now know how to compare two different entities, and we know which grammatical tidbits to look out for because they can be pretty tricky. But now we also have to go further, and we have to learn how to compare more than two entities. So check out the next video for that.